The Battle of Oriskany, fought on August 6, 1777, has been described as one of the bloodiest battles of the American Revolution. The fight for freedom, however, was not in vain, since it was a significant factor in the turning point of the war. The war thus far had brought a series of disasters to the armies of the rebellious colonies. It was the intention of the British to split the colonies by gaining control of New York State, thus dividing the northern states from those in the south. To accomplish this, a three-pronged invasion known as the Campaign of 1777 was planned. And we're going to learn about one of those pronged attacks here at the Battle of Oriskany. General Herkimer's troops entered the ravine at this point. So General Herkimer's troops were headed west from that direction, from Little Falls, where Herkimer organized his men, and some Oneida Indians, including Oneida's Hanyeri Dockstader and his wife, Two Kettles Together, along with their son. So they came from that direction and they headed this way toward the relief of Fort Stanwix in Rome, New York. But an ambush was being prepared for them by Joseph Brant and his Mohawk Indians. Now Brant, whose Mohawk name was Thayendanegea, was alerted of this column from Herkimer home by his sister Molly Brant, who was the widow of Sir William Johnson, former chief of Indian Affairs in the state of New York, and a hero of the French and Indian War at the Battle of Lake George. So Herkimer's men entered this ravine. Now today this is a nice manicured path, gravel path. You wind down it, snake down it, so it's nice, steady incline. But in that day, on that hot day in August of 77, it was not that way. There's a corduroy road that went through here to help the travelers. And it was a narrow column, maybe 2 or 3 men could walk side by side. So you see a remnant here of the array. The trail started out in here at one point. The park has made this like this. And then they decided to make it a little bit more easy for certain groups of people, kids and elderly people, to be able to come down steady at an easy pace. But during that day, the men would walk 3 abreast down this hill. Now Brant's idea was let the column get about halfway through the ravine at the bottom, down there where that bridge is. Once the column had got to the halfway point, Brant and his men would attack, causing chaos, pandemonium. The men would be retreating, running into their own men, trying to get back up out of this ravine, heading back east. Some would head west, some would head north, south. They were going all different directions. Brant was a master creator of chaos and panic in the opposing army. So as Herkimer's men got closer and closer to the creek down here, Brant's men, made up of Senecas, Mohawks, Cayugas, waiting in these bushes here, in the deep grass, thicker than it is now. There's a bullfrog down there giving us the alert. But they'd ask Brant, now? He'd say, not yet. Now? Not yet. Now? Finally. Now. And they fired upon them, not only with guns, but with arrows that were dipped in a certain type of poison, fecal matter. Fecal matter that would cause them to be, not if they didn't get an injury that would kill them, because of the wound, they would get infection. They would die of the infection caused by this poison, this fecal matter that was within the tips of the arrows. So here's that little bullfrog right there. That little guy down in there. They said at the end of the battle, this creek ran red with the blood of men from both sides. Now the Oneidas sided with the Tuscaroras sided with the colonists shortly after the outbreak of the war. So at this battlefield, right in this area, right exactly where we are standing in this ravine here at the Battle of Oriskany, August 6, 1777 was the beginning of the end for the Haudenosaunee, the Six Nations, the Iroquois Confederacy, because this is the first time in all of their history, their thousands of years of history, that one group, one nation attacked another nation. The Oneidas sided with the colonists. They were attacked by the Mohawk, the Senecas, Cayugas, and others within the British Army. And this had never been done in history. So this basically began the decline and the death of the Iroquois Six Nations Confederacy as a group. So chaos ensued here. Men were being shot, bows and arrows, guns, muskets. There was no artillery here. Hand-to-hand combat with hatchets, muskets, the butt of muskets, the tomahawk, clubs. Hand-to-hand combat was a real big part of this battle. So in this area here somewhere, General Nicholas Herkimer, Palatine German immigrant, was shot in his knee, fell off his horse. Horse came down on him, landed. His men were able to get him out from underneath the horse and get him to safety. Up behind a tree, a beech tree. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. Up on the hill right here where Herkimer was able to direct the day's battle until a storm came through and rained and stopped the battle for a couple of hours, basically ending the battle. Herkimer sat there for hours directing this battle. And I'll talk about the aftermath of what happened with his injuries. But right in this area here, folks, again, significant history is made. Not only was this a part of the turning point of the Revolutionary War, get to that in a few minutes about the Battle of Saratoga, how that battle hinged a lot on what happened here. But again, on what happened with the Iroquois Confederacy, the division, the fighting against each other that basically started the beginning of the end for the Six Nations. But also because St. Leger, who was one of the commanders of the British Army, the Loyalists, along with Brant, he was being sent to help with the attack at Saratoga up in modern-day Stillwater, New York. And a column was coming up from New York City, and another column coming down from the north, and they were all to converge on this one area. Well, certain things happened. The army, being led up from New York City, decided they were going to go down and help build up the forces in Philadelphia. So that force went down south. They didn't make it up to Saratoga. This force here, St. Leger, Barry St. Leger was leading, never made it to Saratoga because this battle slowed them up, and he ended up going back west, away from Saratoga. So come September and October, the two battles of Saratoga, there's two battles involving in the Battle of Saratoga, battles, plural, of Saratoga. One was in September, one was in the first part of October, 77, shortly after this battle. Well, that was another turning point because that was the first time in history that the English army ever surrendered to an opposing force. General Burgoyne, John Burgoyne, surrendered to Horatio Gates near Stillwater, modern-day Stillwater, after the battle of the Second Battle of Saratoga. So this little area here, Oriskany, a very small battlefield, an ambush area, was a turning point in a lot of ways, not only for American history as far as colonists, but also in First Nations history with the Haudenosaunee Six Nations. Big history here, and this sign says ambush started here. The militia column on its way to the relief of Fort Stanwix marched into this ravine August 6, 1777, and were ambushed by Loyalists and British. The attackers came out of the hiding in the woods of the west, the north, and the south. So somewhere in this area, this ambush took place. We see this place here, it's quiet, it's serene, peaceful. You hear the bullfrog. But on that hot day in August, it was anything but serene, peaceful, and quiet. So as the men scrambled to get General Herkimer up out of underneath his horse, continued to be shot at, ambushed, bow and arrows, tomahawks, clubs, hand-to-hand warfare at its worst here. Look into the eyes of the person you were killing, crashing your skull. Person would fall to the ground. You take the Iroquois would take their war clubs and smash the skull. It would sound like glass breaking or a pottery smashing. Well, they were able to get Herkimer up this ravine, up onto the little knoll over there. Brant and his men, whoop whoop the time, scaring the opposing forces. Hanyeri and his wife, two kettles together, fought valiantly. Hanyeri was shot, but his wife would hand him a loaded gun, musket. He'd hand her back the empty one, and she would continuously do this as he continued to fight the Loyalists. So this military road, Joseph Brant, familiar with the terrain, probably selected this place for an ambush. Down below, a small stream crossed this military road. The military road of 1777 was about 10 rods north of the present highway. That's the highway over there, so 10 rods. So basically in this area here was this military road that crossed, ran parallel with the Mohawk River from the east, where we're looking, going to the west, Fort Stanwix. From Fort Stanwix to the Oneida Carrying Place, from the Oneida Carrying Place to Fort Oswego by way of Oneida Lake. And that was a military road. It's how this was the highway then. This was the New York State Thruway at that point. So right there's that tree where Nicholas Herkimer was taken. Rested there, as I said, directed the battle. Taken back on the Mohawk River by bateau. Mohawk River's down that way. On the bateau, back to his house in Herkimer home at Little Falls, New York, where he died 10 days later of his injury. Sir John Johnson and Joseph Brant prepared an ambush along this military road. When most of the militia had entered the trap, the hidden Mohawk and Seneca warriors attacked. Johnson's Royal Greens blocked the road to the fort, while Mohawk and Seneca fired a sudden volley, killing hundreds in an instant. Then charged with tomahawks and knives. The fighting was close, savage, and personal. These people knew each other before the war. They may have even fought with each other on the same side of the British in the French and Indian War and the battles in New York State. Survivors of the initial strike regrouped on higher ground west of the ravine, which is up that way. We're going to get up there in a few minutes. And waged a more organized defense, fighting in pairs, one man reloading the musket while the other fired. Now, the Battle of Oriskany lasted just over 4 hours. And as the afternoon wore on, the Mohawk and Seneca grew discouraged and eventually left, went back to their camps. Johnson's Royal Greens ultimately retired as well, leaving the militia badly damaged but not destroyed. After the battle, the few devastated militiamen in the Oneida left standing could only care for a few wounded. According to the oral tradition, the Oneida saved many of the wounded militiamen by hiding them until they would be removed under the cover of darkness. Most of the dead were left on the battlefield, loyalist, rebel colonist, Native American warrior, all tangled together. Early historians suggest that some of the bodies were buried in a series of mass graves, some as early as 1795. Today, the entire battlefield is recognized as hallowed ground. So the tree here, not the original tree, this is a maple tree now. But as we head west, heading up toward Visitor Center, the Oriskany Battlefield Monument, by the way, made of granite stone taken out of the defunct Erie Canal, which runs parallel with the Mohawk River, just a little ways to the north. Well, here's the marker. It says, near the spot a beech tree stood, which during the Battle of Oriskany sheltered the wounded General Herkimer while he commanded, gave orders that made Saratoga possible, and decided the fate of a nation. So the Battle of Oriskany, a small area, but a very, very important area. Not only one way, with the deciding of the Battle of Saratoga, but also in the demise of the Six Nation Haudenosaunee Iroquois Indians, First Nations here in New York State. Battle of Oriskany, August 6, 1777. Key part in American history.